Hey, what's up, YouTubers? I just want to make a short video on why you may want to open up a SA corporation if you live in Latin America, or if you want a little bit more financial privacy or personal privacy in Latin America, or just in life in general, even if you live in the United States or Europe or wherever you may live. Down here, you can open up a corporate account in most Latin American countries. It's a pretty simple thing. You just go to a lawyer. He'll write up the documents and do all that, and it could take 2 weeks to a month or two, just depending on how busy he is, what country it is, and what the situation is. Also, too, he may or may not have off-the-shelf companies already uh, registered, so that can make a difference too. And as far as the cost, it really depends what you're doing. If you're just using it to store assets and to put various assets like cars, boats, land, or bank accounts, it can be cheaper for the day-to-day running of it if you're using it to actually run a business in Latin America or even anywhere else for that matter. It depends how complicated it is. The more complicated it is, the more it'll cost. But basically, what I'm talking about is you'll need an accountant to do the paperwork every quarter, down here whenever they do that. I don't know if it's monthly or quarterly, but they do the paperwork on that, and it can be 50 to 100 bucks if it's a month. If it's simple, if it's really, really complicated, it can be quite a bit more than that. Really depends on what kind of business you're running and what you're actually doing with it. Now, some of the reasons you may want one is because, say, you're in Latin America, and generally speaking, now it's hard for Americans to open a bank account. Just as an example, say you can actually open one with your passport. It's not really hard, but it can be, and it can be difficult if you're not using a lawyer, because with the help of a lawyer, he can go down to the banks that say they won't open an account, but once you have a lawyer, they usually change their mind and then they can open an account. He also knows which banks will and which banks won't, which ones will be a pain in the neck, which ones won't. And he also knows which banks are really well capitalized and where you should keep your money and where you really shouldn't. He also give you heads up on banks that are teetering on the precipice of bankruptcy and advise you not to get money there or to withdraw funds if you actually have money there. So reasons you may want to open one is if you're living in North America and you're coming down here and you want to restart your life in a more private way, you can store whatever assets you want in that company, such as boats, cars, but more typically cars, and real estate and bank accounts. And it's quite possible maybe you can put a corporate a brokerage account or something like that in there if you like to trade or own long-term assets like that. But basically, you can, down here it's not really hard to get an apartment and rent one in whatever name you want. Some places require a passport, mostly they don't. So you can just put down wherever you want. But in the event that you want utilities and everything like that registered in a corporate name, that's a very simple matter. And your lawyer can advise you and show you how to do that really simply. There's other ways around that too. I won't go into that here, but if you don't have a lot of money, there's other ways you can get around that without giving up your real name if you value your privacy and you want to start over. And down here you can do that. It's still like it was in the US or Europe like 50 or 60 years ago, whereas they don't require a lot of ID for most things. About the only thing they really require an ID for is flying internationally and opening a bank account, and in some cases running the account. It just depends what kind of account you have and what you're doing with it, things of that nature. So like say, just as an example, in Guatemala you get a 2-year residency. Well, it's for the temp it's 2 years, but actually before the 2 years is up, you can get the permanent. Well, once you become a permanent residency and you get your ID, you can open a bank account in any of the banks here you want. And how it works is a lot like in Europe. Like, just as an example, there's no bank secrecy in the United States, but once a person becomes a resident in the US and opens an account, they don't report that information back to Europe. Again, no bank secrecy, but they don't report it back. Well, it's the same down here. Once you get your local ID, you can open up a bank account and nothing's going to get reported back. Now, of course, if you open it up with a U.S. passport, that's totally different. They'll report everything to the U.S. government. So if you want more privacy, you can open up a corporate account, pass some of your assets there, and then after 2 years, pass the assets into your own name if that's what you wish to do. If you want to keep more of a low profile, that's one reason. Like I said, the other reason is if you want to put things in the name of the corporation, like services, like utilities, things you buy online. You can have all that sent to your in the name of your corporate name or in the name of your lawyer, and you can have all that sent to your lawyer's address. If you don't, just as if you want more privacy that way. Another thing is in Latin America, taxes are low. They're not too much. I don't want to say they're non-existent, but they're not really high. As an example, you might pay 5 to 10% personal income tax here, and you might pay 5 to 10% corporate, maybe. Generally speaking, there's really not going to be much of a corporate tax. So maybe you want to do some business down here, and you'll need the corporate name, and you want to show the income from tax down here. I'm not talking about in the U.S. If you're a resident down here and you live here, 6 to 10 months, it depends what status you use. But as an American, you can earn up to about 100,000 if you stay out of the country 5 to 6 months or 8 months to 10 months. It just depends how you do that. There's 3 different ways you can do that, which I won't get into here. But for the people who just stay out like 10 months, you automatically get an exemption of 100,000. So if you have business income or income from a job or something, and it's not in the U.S., you can get that tax free. So down here, you just open up a corporate account. You put the income can come from there, and it would be tax free up to 100,000. And whatever was in excess of that, you could just keep it there until you wanted to pay tax on that. And of course, there's other ways around that, which I won't go into here. And everything I'm talking about, you should consult with a lawyer and an accountant. And if they won't sign off on it, don't do it. I'm not giving legal advice, but down here, all that can be done pretty discreetly, pretty privately, and there's even U.S.-based accounting firms that are aware of what I'm talking about, and you can consult them too, just to get a second or third opinion. Anyways, as far as banking, you can set up your banking so your name isn't really visible. So if you're looking for privacy that way, that can help you out too. So you can set up the account, and then the account will be off the radar if you're worried about that. You can just set up a US dollar account in a local currency, or if you want a variety of currencies, and you have to set up a brokerage account within that corporate account. Anyways, to get to the bottom line, these things cost $1,500 to $2,500. They can cost more. They can cost a little less to maintain them. It can be from $50 to $100 to $200, $300. It really depends who your lawyer is, what you're doing with it, how complicated it is. If you're not doing anything too complicated, it's going to be more like 50 to 100 bucks. It's just all over the map what it can cost. It just depends what country you want it in, what you're doing with it, things like that. So I just wanted to put out a video why you might consider having it, why you need it. Like say you want to start a business, or you want to keep your assets out of your own name, and you want to have a US dollar account to use to settle accounts overseas, and you want that more or less invisible, things like that you can use it for. And then secondarily, you can use it to put any local assets here or utility bills. That you don't necessarily need it for that, and there's other ways around that. But if you want to, you can have all your utilities, cable bill, Wi-Fi bill, all that put in the corporate account, and you can totally be off the radar if that's what you want. And some people, that's what they're doing. They're coming down here. They want to be off the radar. They don't want to be cash only. They want to have banking and avail themselves of the internet and that nature. And if you want to keep a low profile there, you're going to have to talk to a few professionals, including a lawyer, on how to do that. It's not super complicated, but it can be depending on what your level of discretion is. But anyways, I just thought I'd make a video on why you may or may not want a corporate account. Some reasons why you may not is the cost and the expense of it. And if you're just doing simple things and you're running a simple business, it's just a cash and carry, may not be worth it. Only you can decide that. And the other reason is just the cost. You just don't want to deal with the cost. But the thing is, you never know when you might inherit a lot of money, when you might make a pile of money in the markets. And you just want to put some away in a corporate account where it can be more or less invisible. So those are the reasons you may want it short term, and close it out after a few years if you don't want it. And then long term, maybe you start making more money and you need to do some tax planning and and you want to keep that tax pretty low or non-existent. Corporate accounts in Latin America are fairly tax efficient despite what you read online. Keep in mind, a lot of what you read online on embassy websites hasn't been updated in 5 or 10 years. So you just want to be aware of that and run everything by a lawyer and accountant, and by a lawyer and accountant who understands U.S. tax law or European tax law, if that's where you're from. But you want to keep it simple, and you want to keep it low priced. And if you're just running a simple business or you're retired, you may not really need one. I really don't recommend one unless you're really into privacy, or you starting a second career in a business or something like that, where you want to shield your assets and shield your income from whoever your enemies are. Anyways, thanks. Like, share, subscribe. Tell me what you think. Bye.